everybody. This is Dianne. Hello and welcome to Biters.
And this is Marnell, and I thought we were talking about Game of Thrones.
You wish we were talking about Game of Thrones.
Oh, I have another reason to stay off social media on Sunday nights.
For how long? How many episodes are there?
There's like 5 or 6.
That's not very many to finish out such a big series.
No, but they're supposed to be longer. I think the season premiere was only an hour, but like they're all supposed to be like 90 minutes. So we're getting our money's worth.
Okay, so my friend Todd told me that George R.R. Martin is actually pitching like a prequel to HBO.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard
been
that?
in the works for a while.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
See, I'm so not into the whole Game of Thrones thing that I didn't know. I stand corrected.
Speaking of prequels,
shall we talk about that first?
I think so.
Okay.
It was a good segue.
So just so everybody knows, we are going to talk about The Walking Dead eventually, but I have to give a shout out to Pedro Pelez for recommending Black Summer.
I binged the entire thing on Saturday.
So I have 1 episode left, and I swear to God, it's the first thing that I have not wanted to turn off.
It is so good.
It's really good.
So it's on Netflix, right?
Yeah, it dropped on April 11th on Netflix. So it's only been out for about a week.
And it's a prequel to the show Z Nation on Sci-Fi.
Which is just insane because as I was telling you before we signed on, I tried to watch Z Nation and I thought it was terrible. So it's just crazy to me that Black Summer is so good.
Yeah, I always saw the advertisements for Z Nation and I'm just like, it looks kooky, you know, just it kind of looks like the Evil Dead of the zombie genre, even though Evil Dead is kind of a zombie genre, but yeah, it didn't appeal to me. And Black Summer, if anybody is looking for something to tide them over until Fear the Walking Dead starts, Black Summer on Netflix.
The only problem is it's not going to last that long. You're going to run out of episodes really fast.
Yeah. I think there were only 6 or 7 of those.
I think there's 8. I want to say there's 8 because we have the one remaining to watch, which we'll watch within the next couple of nights.
Oh man. Yeah. Saturday, it was just episode after episode. Netflix is like, are you still watching? Are you still watching?
You're like, yes.
I'm like, stop judging me, Netflix.
So I want to propose to you that since we're probably not going to review the whole series, we at least review the first episode next week and kind of talk about our overall thoughts about the first season.
I think so.
Yay! All right.
Yeah.
Very good. It's kind of a departure from we're going to do a different type of movie from each zombie genre, but for people who haven't watched it, it's fast zombies.
Yes.
And
much like the 28 Days Later zombies.
Yes, and they are scary zombies.
Very. Like, they're almost problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one that like figured out how to get up on the bus.
Yes.
Yeah, that was terrifying.
Or not to like give a bunch of stuff away, but the one that goes crawling through the venting.
Oh, yeah.
I've got chills going up my spine just even thinking about it.
Oh man, I was just, I was like, she's a goner. Give up.
Yes.
Like, just get it over with.
Yes.
Yeah.
No spoilers though. We're not going to tell you if she makes it or not. You have to watch the series. We're not even going to tell you who we're talking about. All right. So
Black Summer on Netflix. Watch it. We'll review the first episode next episode.
Very good.
Sweet.
Yes. So thank you, Pedro, very, very much.
Yes. Excellent.
It's been a long time since I've been enthused about something that I've turned on.
So it'll probably get canceled.
Oh, don't say that. I actually did Google to see if there was a second episode in process, and the article that I read said,
season.
Yeah. Thank you, second season. And the article that I read basically said, don't get freaked out. Netflix is, known to kind of take their time renewing stuff. It's not a big deal.
But they're also like really big on like cutting out when things are on top, like Daredevil, Jessica Jones, I can't say that much for like Luke Cage and the Iron Fist because they weren't that great to begin with, but they're really known for just like cutting a series because it's like moving on.
Well, so the conversation around that, though, is that they're losing the rights to those characters because Disney now has Marvel and Disney is starting their streaming service.
I can see that.
So unless Sci-Fi puts up a big giant stink and says they want their Z Nation property back, which I'm not sure how all of that would work, they're at least not going to be facing that kind of juggernaut saying, nope, you don't get our properties anymore.
Yeah.
So I am hoping there's a season 2.
Me too.
Yeah, very much. And I haven't even watched the season finale yet. All right, so on to what I thought was going to be the season 2 finale, and I was wrong.
Yes. And you would think, because you would think we kill off big characters on the season finale, but no. Big shows like Game of Thrones and Walking Dead like to kill them off on the episode before the season finale, like we saw this season.
So that is much to my surprise that I had misremembered what happened with season 2. So we decided that we were going to take the recommendation of our listeners and do a comic book comparison. So we thought, oh, well, let's talk about the episode where Shane dies. And I was like, oh, yeah, no problem. It's Beside the Dying Fire, which was episode 13 of season 2. Then I started watching and I was like, I'm wrong.
Oops, episode 12. Shane's already dead in 13.
So it's episode 12, also called Better Angels.
Yes.
And it premiered on March 11th, 2012. 2012. 7 years ago.
That's bananas.
Mm-hmm.
I was in my early 30s.
I was in my early 40s.
Oh my goodness. So crazy.
So, Better Angels, what was your rating for it?
For some reason, it lost a little bit on the second watch.
I agree.
Yeah. I gave it a 3.9 flathead screwdrivers.
Oh my God, how funny. I gave it a 3.89 stolen pistols. It's very rare that our ratings line up like this.
So close.
Yeah. I just felt like of all of the older episodes, it was one that did not hold up for me, and I was really surprised by that.
No, yeah, me too. I kept going through, like, did I think about the characters like this back in season 2? Did I feel about the characters like I feel now? And we picked this because of losing the character Shane and its parallel with the books. But yeah, I was like, kind of like, what did I ever see in this show?
Oh no, I wasn't quite that bad, but no, I definitely felt like it didn't hold up.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad, but I was just like, I feel like this was like a much stronger show back then. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I guess it's just evolved so much that it's an entirely different animal now.
So did you watch anything before or after from season 2?
No, I read some synopsises though.
I actually went ahead and watched the season finale for episode 2 after I finished this episode and did still feel like that held up. So I think it was just this particular episode.
That's interesting.
And I will tell you that the episode where zombie Sophia comes out of the barn still remains one of my all-time favorite episodes of The Walking Dead.
Of course. And
that's from season 2.
Yeah, for some reason, I thought that was a season finale, and that was a mid-season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because then Herschel leaves the farm and goes to the bar, and then that's how they get Randall, basically.
Right.
So yeah, when I was going through all the episodes for season 2, trying to gauge what had happened before this episode and what happened after, I was like, oh wow, season 2 was pretty big.
Yeah, there was some huge stuff in season 2. Cherokee Rose, Chupacabra, those were great episodes.
Yeah.
So I just kind of felt like Better Angels, when you put it in the context of season 2, was more forgettable.
Yeah. And that's crazy because Shane dies.
Right.
And we're just off the heels of Dale dying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is their first back-to-back big main character deaths.
I read that too, that it was the first time that they'd had 2 episodes in a row where they had a main character go.
Unfortunately, I think that some stuff, I can't remember how it leaked out. I don't know if it was John Bernthal getting cast in other things, but people knew that he was leaving the show. And of course, from the books, you know that Shane dies, but he lived long past his expiration date from the books. So,
I was so not in tune with Walking Dead news then, because I was still relatively early in my viewership of Walking Dead, that I had no idea he was leaving the show. So I'm glad I wasn't spoiled.
I think it was one of those things where it was just headlines you couldn't avoid, like as soon as he got cast in something, they were like, oh, he's off The Walking Dead. It's only a matter of time.
I have things to say about that. All right. So some numbers. There were 6.89 million viewers on the same day. And it is rated 8.9 out of 10 on IMDb. So it's actually really highly rated on IMDb. And I think the numbers were probably pretty consistent with what we were doing in season 2. I would have to go back and look at other season 2 numbers, but I would say that The Walking Dead was still building at that point. Yeah. It was not the juggernaut that it became in seasons 4 and season 5.
Yeah, I mean, some of its biggest fans, came in, 3 years after it started. I just so happened to, somebody had mentioned it to me the day after it premiered. And so I wound up, if it was a Sunday night, I watched it on a Monday night and was hooked right from the beginning. So
well, you sent me a disc where you had burned the first season and I was utterly destroyed. It was so good.
I can't believe I made you. That's so funny. I don't remember that. Yeah. I don't remember being the linchpin in that.
You are the reason that Biters continues today.
Oh, that's funny. At least with the Real Housewives of Alaska.
Yes. So, do you have anything that you want to say about the title?
So there's a book called Better Angels of Our Nature, and I remember also hearing it somewhere in a speech, and Martin Luther King Jr. Included it in one of his, I don't know if it was a speech or a writing, but he wanted America to do better, to fulfill its promise. But just as importantly, he wanted us to bend towards justice by tapping into the better angels of our nature.
So it originates in Abe Lincoln's 1861 inaugural address.
Ah.
Where he talks about the better angels of our nature, and he's talking about kind of healing from the Civil War.
Okay. That's why I'm like, I know it's in a speech somewhere.
So it makes sense that I don't attribute it to Martin Luther King, but it makes sense that Martin Luther King would borrow from Abe Lincoln's inaugural address.
Right.
Yeah.
That's sort of symbolistic.
So I don't remember if this is something that Dale said or if it's something that he implied. I actually did some reading on the wiki about this episode, and they said that the title is really a nod to Dale in the previous episode, appealing to the better angels of the group.
Right, because they were arguing whether or not they wanted to execute Randall.
Right, and Dale was arguing for them to hold on to their humanity.
Yes.
So, and when you think about it, just the whole Rick Shane struggle is about holding on to your humanity and hanging on to the better angels of your nature.
Right. And so, yeah, we will totally get into that.
So that's really all I had to say about the title.
Yeah, I agree.
Our writers were Evan T. Riley and Glenn Mazzara. And Evan T. Riley has written episodes for season 2 and season 3. He wrote Cherokee Rose, which we mentioned a few minutes ago. He wrote Nebraska, which I think is actually the one that took place in the bar.
Yes.
And then in season 3, he wrote Walk With Me, The Suicide King, and Pray, which also was written with Glenn Mazzara. And he is known also for writing on Rescue Me.
Oh, okay.
And for writing on a series called Ballers, which was a series that starred The Rock.
Ah, I had no idea there was a series with The Rock.
So then Glenn Mazzara is actually known for being the showrunner for seasons 2 and 3. And he actually, I didn't know this, earned 2 Saturn Awards and a Bram Stoker Award for his writing on The Walking Dead.
Wow.
So he is responsible for Wildfire from season 1, Bloodletting, 18 Miles Out, which he wrote with Scott Gimple, and then Beside the Dying Fire, which he wrote with Robert Kirkman, which are all in season 2. And then Seed, Prey, and Welcome to the Tombs, which are from season 3. And he is... Oh, go ahead.
He's got some big stuff coming up, too. So The Dark Tower is becoming a TV series.
Yes, I saw that.
He's announced as a writer on that. Hancock 2, that's the Will Smith superhero movie.
Which I think we had kind of talked about that before, and we were like, why does there need to be a Hancock 2?
Okay, I vaguely remember that.
Yeah.
And then a TV series, Sin City, which is based on the Frank Miller graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool.
Yeah, so Glenn Mazzara's got some big stuff coming out. I agree.
All stuff I plan to watch, even Hancock 2, just because I saw Hancock 1.
I just think of him most as the showrunner, and I know that he got really dogged for being the showrunner, but I actually felt like seasons 2 and 3 were really good seasons, so I don't have the animosity toward Glenn Mazzara that some Walking Dead fans do.
Yeah, they were. I mean, the farm and the prison.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't get a whole lot bigger than that until now.
I've heard a lot of people complain over the years that they felt like we spent too much time on the farm. Which I was satisfied with that arc. I mean, aside from arguing that this episode didn't hold up as well as I expected it to, I was satisfied with that arc.
Yeah, I was too. I agree.
So then our director was a gentleman named Guy Ferland, and we have talked about him before because he wrote he directed TS-19, which was season 1. He also directed Chupacabra in season 2, as well as this episode. And then in season 3, Walk With Me, The Killer Within, and season 4, Infected. And wow. He's got a ton of stuff that we recognize in his director credits. He directed 21 episodes of Elementary.
Ah, yes.
Lucy Liu, not Lucy Lawless. He's directed for Ray Donovan, the TV series The Mist, based on the Stephen King novel. He's directed Into the Badlands.
Strain.
He's worked on Daredevil, Gotham, Sons of Anarchy.
Blacklist, Gotham, yeah.
It made me wonder if he directed Ryan Hurst in anything.
Oh, yeah.
Because of his time on Sons of Anarchy.
Right. That would make sense.
Yeah. And he also has a Once Upon a Time credit, and you always remind me that Sonequa Martin Green was in Once Upon a Time.
And several other lesser kind of characters that we've profiled, because it all ties back. I mean, even Sadiq, has been on Once Upon a Time.
Oh, right. So, I remember you saying that.
Yeah, he was Jafar.
Avi Nash.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. It makes me wonder why the 2 writers and the director were seasons 2, 3, and 4, but haven't done anything more. Like the show. I mean, it's nothing against the writers or the show. It's just, it seems like, you do 2 or 3 seasons and then you move on, or they bring in somebody new for I don't know, a fresh perspective.
Well, I'm pretty sure Glenn Mazzara left on not great terms. So I think that's the reason Glenn Mazzara is no longer involved. But I don't know about the other two. But for some reason, I have this feeling, I have this recollection that Glenn Mazzara did not leave The Walking Dead on the best of terms.
Well, he wouldn't be the first one.
As far as we know, he's not suing them, right? No, you said he was, actually. I remember you saying it when you were talking about the lawsuit. So he actually is part of that lawsuit that Frank Darabont has against AMC.
Oh. You have a good memory.
For The Strangest Things. And speaking of The Strangest Things, why don't we talk about who our featured cast is?
So we decided to profile Randall because he actually was in 3 episodes, and he was probably the only one we had never profiled.
I think you're right. I mean, I look back and I think we've pretty much talked about the primary characters from seasons 1 and 2.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Matt Zagan.
Michael
Zagan.
Is it Zegan or Zagan?
Zegan.
All right, so let's try that again. Michael Zegan.
There we go.
AKA Randall Culver.
I know. I can't believe he had a last name.
Right?
So Michael is about 40 years old. He is not married. He doesn't have any children. He is not rumored to be dating anybody right now, but he...
How would you know that?
Lots and lots of articles. So he was connected in 2012 to Emily Kinney.
Really?
Yes.
Oh,
apparently.
Wow.
They dated. So I wonder if she's like, hey, I'm on this show that you should try out for.
Well, so the other thing that I thought of, and not to steal any thunder, but he had a recurring role in Rescue Me.
Yes.
So I wondered if he had crossed paths with our writer, Evan T. Riley, and maybe that was the connection.
Yeah, it totally could be.
But Emily Kinney is as good a connection as any. Right.
And it was 2012 when they were rumored to have been dating. Neither of them confirmed nor denied that they were dating. So, but they're both seem to be very private about their social lives.
Mm-hmm.
So, before The Walking Dead, it really surprised me that he was such a seasoned actor to have such a small role on, one of the biggest shows. He has done quite a bit. So he got his start in 2001 in a short called The Pizza Boy, but then he kind of got his bigger break on The Late Show with David Letterman. And I did not realize that there was reoccurring characters on the David Letterman show.
I was never a giant Letterman fan, so...
it kind of makes sense because every once in a while they'll do a shtick with the guy in the deli down the street. So I guess he would be a reoccurring character. But so Michael was on the David Letterman show 50 times as a reoccurring character.
Dwight, the troubled teen.
Yes. Which in 2002, he was 22.
Did you YouTube any of those? Because I bet those are actually pretty funny.
I didn't.
I didn't either.
I watched a couple of interviews, but...
I tried to watch a couple of interviews and they were painful.
I did a lot of reading. But so, like you said, he was in Rescue Me. He was in 42 episodes of Rescue Me. So that's pretty big. Before The Walking Dead. He was also in a movie called Adventureland, which is super funny. And he was also in a movie called The Girl Next Door. And for any of you who are true crime buffs, you will recognize this movie because there was actually 2 movies that were made about the subject. It's based on a Jackie Ketchum novel of the same name, and it follows the unspeakable torture and abuses committed on a teenage girl in the care of her aunt, and the boys who witnessed it and failed to report the crime.
Oh, that's horrible. So
he played one of the boys, unfortunately. But I mean, it's just such a terrible yet fascinating story if you're a true crime buff. So it's funny. I've seen that movie, but I don't recognize Michael from anything. He was in a movie called The Box, which was not a great movie, but it had Cameron Diaz in it. So if you're a fan of hers, he is he was in Boardwalk Empire. He was in 11 episodes of that and 3 episodes of Girls. So he's got a lot of credits with HBO.
He played Bugsy Siegel in Boardwalk Empire.
Yep. And his big show now is The Marvelous Miss Maisel,
which has gotten great reviews.
It has, and it has a season 2.
It's Amazon Prime, right?
It is Amazon Prime, okay. Yes. And this is the one that he gets recognized for now. There's, a giant billboard of him up in Times Square and that sort of thing. And he also is coming out in a movie called The Stand-In with Drew Barrymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Randall did good for himself.
So I have to tell you, I watched some of the more recent interviews, or tried to watch some of the more recent interviews where he talks about The Marvelous Miss Maisel.
Mm-hmm.
And he is unrecognizable. Like, I would not put him together as Randall.
Yeah.
The boy cleans up nice.
He does. Yeah.
So it does look like you can watch a little collection of Dwight the Troubled Teen on YouTube.
Oh,
if you want to go back and watch that.
I'm going to have to do that before bed.
And I don't know, I may have to look at The Marvelous Miss Maisel because I've heard some good things about it. Maybe that could be my binge until Good Omens comes out.
I have too. And he kind of hooked me with, it's a feel good show. It's something to laugh with. Well, you're going through such dark times. The country as a whole. So yeah.
I am all about anything that distracts me at this point.
Right? Or makes me laugh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I did want to point out one thing which I thought was kind of cool. He went to school at Skidmore College.
Yes.
And he actually went to school with John Bernthal.
Yep. But he got bit by the acting bug early. He was age 8 and his parents took him to see Les Mis.
Oh, cool.
And soon after, he was enrolled in acting classes where it was him and 20 girls, which was great for him. Not because like an 8-year-old has game or anything, but he always got the male lead. There was no competition.
Oh, that's funny.
So he actually grew up in acting classes with a lot of women. And so he enjoys like being on female centric shows. And that's what the Marvelous Miss Maisel is. So I thought that was really cool of him that, he's so secure with himself.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. He garnered a Screen Actors Guild Award nomination in 2015 for his performance in Boardwalk Empire. He received the nomination in the category of Outstanding Performance in Ensemble Drama Series.
For Boardwalk Empire or for Marvelous Miss Maisel?
Nope, Boardwalk Empire.
Because I'm pretty sure that Marvelous Miss Maisel has won awards.
It has. He hasn't, but the show has.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see. Oh, he collects baseball caps and vintage stuff. So there was an article in I want to say the New York Times, that he kind of went through his apartment and kind of his daily life. So the guy's, kind of a breakout actor. He's been in some stuff. He can afford stuff. He still shops at secondhand stores, auctions of estate auctions and garage sales. Most of his t-shirts are secondhand.
Oh, that's funny.
All of his furniture is secondhand, and he's had it forever. He doesn't spend money on stuff, but he does collect stuff. So he collects baseball cap, vintage stuff, and what was the other thing? Oh darn, there was something else that he collects, and I can't find it. Oh, theater memorabilia.
Well, he's certainly in the right show right now to be collecting vintage. Pardon me. Let me try that again. Vintage things, because Marvelous Miss Maisel looks like it's set in the 50s.
It is, and he absolutely loves the setting of the 50s. Apparently, when he was growing up, he was obsessed with the movie Back to the Future, which takes place in the 50s, and he's just kind of always loved the period. So he did steal a blanket from the set of the Marvelous Miss Maisel, and it's in his living room right now. Don't tell anyone. His hidden talent is he is a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon champion.
Oh, that's funny.
I thought that was a hilarious hidden talent. Yeah, so there's really not much on him. His Instagram is kind of just a lot of cool random snaps of dogs and kids and places he's been and food and things like that. And his Twitter's just him. There's a lot of he's a lefty. Let's just say that. So if that's not your thing, don't follow him. But he also posts a lot of his work on there. So he was just on Carson Daly's show for an interview a couple months ago. So you can go and watch some of his stuff there.
And it seems like most of the interviews are about his current work. That's certainly what I ran into. Yeah,
definitely. I had no idea the Marvelous Miss Maisel was as big as it is. Apparently I'm missing out. He is a member of a sketch comedy group in New York called the Hotties Galore. And Hotties, the S at the end is a $. Yeah, that's really all I could find on him. I read a lot about him.
I didn't read quite as much as you did, but I tried. I tried to be a good contributor to the featured cast corner.
He even has an interview in Town and Country or something.
Oh my goodness. I wasn't that in depth, I will be honest.
So that is Michael Zegan, aka Randall. Who we also lost in this episode.
Who we did, and he gave us some important info in this episode, which we will talk about.
All right.
So Whisperer's Corner was fairly light, but one of the big things was that Kaylee Fleming has signed a contract for season 10. She is getting $250,000, which I think she is grossly underpaid. Because she really is one of the best things happening on the series right now.
Yeah.
And I sincerely mean that. I feel like she is being underpaid for her role. That seems like pocket change compared to the money that other people on this show are making. They shouldn't discriminate her just because she's a 10-year-old, or shouldn't discriminate against her just because she's a 10-year-old.
Right.
She also is getting 5% of the net merchandising for anything involving her character.
Oh, well, that's usually a major profit for the actors and actresses.
Yeah, we'll see how it turns out for her. I haven't seen much in the way of Judith merchandising yet, but if she sticks around, that could change.
So there's usually about 15 or 16 episodes in a season. So yeah, $250,000. That math doesn't work out.
Yeah, they made it sound like that was like her flat fee for the whole season. It wasn't like she's getting $250,000 per episode.
No, yeah.
So I really felt like she was getting seriously shortchanged.
Yeah, because she is she's become such a beloved character in such a short amount of time.
Well, and she does such a great job. She is carrying stuff that an adult actor would have a hard time carrying.
Yes. Yes. She is a scene stealer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The only other person that competes with her is Negan, and I just love those two together. So
still not convinced about the redemption arc. I'm still not convinced it's a good idea, but yes, I think that the scenes between them are terrific.
Maybe that's the third Walking Dead series. It's going to be the Negan and Judith show.
Well, they say that they're focusing on two young women who have come of age in the ZA, so it kind of makes me wonder if one of those isn't Judith. It's
Judith and what's
Charlie?
Her name from Fear the Walking Dead.
Yeah, Charlie.
Oh no, I was thinking of the daughter.
Oh, Alicia.
Alicia, yes.
No, Alicia was born before the ZA, so they're talking about kids who came of age in the ZA.
Okay.
So more Judith's era.
Okay.
Yeah.
Judith and Charlie.
Wouldn't that be an interesting little spinoff?
That would be super interesting.
Yeah. I would be totally down with Kaylee Fleming continuing on this show or on the new show.
Me too.
All right. So another item in the Whisperer's Corner is that Ian Goldberg of Fear the Walking Dead says there will be one walker in particular. And then he says, I have to be careful saying this around Gimple. Let's just say this walker will open up a world of possibilities for storytelling. So apparently there is one pivotal walker in Fear the Walking Dead who's going to open up a whole bunch in the Walking Dead universe.
Oh, weird.
So there's speculation about, whether or not it's something connected to the Whisperers. There's speculation about whether or not it's the radioactive walkers that we mentioned in Whisperer's Corner, I think last week or maybe the week before.
See, my imagination is going wild right now, thinking, do we get kind of an intelligent walker or somebody who's like a half walker, like they're a zombie, but they're also lucid? Like my imagination just went crazy. I didn't go anywhere near the radioactive or any whispers or anything like that. I went totally off the map.
I think it's probably going to be the radioactive walkers, but we'll have to see if we can figure it out while we're watching Fear.
Yeah.
Let's see. A thing that I saw in the news tonight is that Ross Marquand said in an interview with Heart FM, which I have never heard of before, that The Walking Dead is going to be a franchise that will go on for 30 years, just like the Star Trek franchise.
Yeah, I did not even think of that. That is a good point.
So I don't think that Ross has any big behind the scenes information. I think it was probably just clickbait and he's probably just speculating, but that was an item that I found in the news today.
But it's very true. I mean, I'm mainly a TNG fan, so it doesn't really occur to me that there were several other Star Trek series that went on for, 30, 40 years.
Well, and continuing with the new series Discovery that Sonequa Martin Green is in.
No, the Orville is the new Star Trek.
Well, you could probably get some pushback from the people who are filming and watching Discovery. And then go ahead.
Discovery has gotten better. I haven't watched any of season 2, but I kind of harped on it on season 1 early in the season. But season 2, or at the end of season 1, got more interesting. So I haven't watched season 2 yet.
I haven't watched it because I'm not paying for another service.
Don't get me started.
Yeah. All right. The last thing that I had in Whisperer's Corner, which I totally thought of you and Thomas O'Mara and Brian, was that Kim Dickens is open to Madison's return.
No.
So I clicked on it. Of course, it was another piece of clickbait with comicbook.com. And actually, that's not even remotely what Kim Dickens said. She basically said, as far as she knows, Madison is dead, that she's super proud of this role. This is one of her favorite roles. That was really the quote. There was nothing at all about Madison potentially coming back.
So what's funny is I can't remember where I heard it. I feel like I heard it, I didn't read it. somebody was talking about Deadwood, and they were talking about Kim Dickens, and they were like, oh, we just miss her so much on Fear the Walking Dead. And, they could totally bring her back because we didn't actually see her die, and they should bring her back. And I'm like, nope. Just stop talking.
I think they've made it pretty clear that she's dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really all I had for Whisperer's Corner. A little bit of news, the news about Kaylee Fleming, the news about the walker being potentially a universe expanding walker, and then a little bit of clickbait.
Yeah, there's not really much out there, and I don't think there's going to be until we get closer to Fear coming out.
We've got another, month and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I guess, takes us into our good, bad, and ugly for this episode.
Yes.
So
Do you want to start?
Sure. So my good was actually where Lori tries to bury the hatchet with Shane. And bear with me. The reason that I chose that as my good is because I really felt like it was the moment in the episode that set Shane on his course. So she thanks him for being there for her. She apologizes for putting him and Rick at odds. And she actually even says to him that she's not even sure whose baby she's carrying.
Right.
And I kind of feel like that just started Shane's wheels really turning and set him on his collision course with Rick.
He was already amped up before that, but you're right. I think right after that is when he went into the barn or shed that they were keeping Randall in.
And was like hitting himself on the head and getting himself further and further wound up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think you're right. Yeah. I didn't see it that way because he was just already so over the top before that. And he had been, of course, in the previous episodes. And it's funny, we're going to talk about the books later on in the episode. But it comes off like way less in the books. I mean, the build up to his near psychosis on the show was just, it was so drawn out and I enjoyed it. I'm saying that in a good way.
Mm-hmm,
and it was so short lived in the books. It was like 2 pages long.
I agree. And that's definitely something that I wanted to bring up when we talked about the books as well, is that I really felt like they gave John Bernthal so much more to work with.
Yes.
And I really feel like he fully realized this character, and I really appreciated that about Shane, especially going back and comparing it to the comic books.
And it's so funny because I don't remember this Shane. I mean, I know that Shane went crazy and was going to kill Rick and everything, but I look back fondly on Shane just because John Bernthal is such an awesome guy that, he's in real life, he's so fun and funny and everything that it when I go back and watch the episodes where he's Shane, I remember how much Shane was just like, oh my God, this guy is off the rails. Like somebody needs to put that rabid dog down.
That's a great description. He was so good at being the rabid dog, though.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why they gave him the role of the Punisher, is he just can play that darkness so well.
Mm-hmm. And he really brought it out in Shane. I thought he did a really great job.
Yep. So that actually is my good.
Oh.
Is Crazy Shane. I just love the way that they fleshed out the character. I just read the first volume of the Walking Dead book last night, and I was sorely disappointed in his character in the book. And I'm so glad that they fleshed it out in the show and that they gave him this. And it was just an escalating storyline. I mean, you could see it just boil, like over like the last half of the season, that he kept getting wound up and wound up and wound up, and he finally just popped. And yeah, it was so much better in the show. So
Mm-hmm.
and John Bernthal did such a good job that I love Crazy Shane.
I do too. I thought he was great.
So what was your bad?
So I couldn't really put my finger on a bad. It just kind of goes back to that feeling that it didn't totally hold up and that this particular episode in the context of season 2 was kind of clunky.
Yeah.
So I don't have a specific bad. It was just overall that feeling of disappointment going back and watching it and not liking it as much as I have in past viewings. And believe me, I've watched the heck out of the first 4 seasons of The Walking Dead. So I was surprised that I didn't enjoy this episode as much as I have in the past.
So when I rewatched it or watched it, I don't remember feeling this way about the show when I watched it, but my bad was the Rick-tatorship.
Oh.
Yeah, this is when we got, you will do what Rick says when Rick says it. And it seems like such a dark time. That just isn't the Rick that came to be, you know?
And he actually even says in the next episode, this isn't a democracy anymore.
Right. And so between that and remembering my dislike for the character Lori,
oh,
it really brought the episode down for me. It distracted me so much that Rick was a total jerk.
He really was a jerk. I was actually kind of surprised by that too.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember the Rick-tatorship storyline, but I don't remember feeling this way about Rick.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I felt that way back in season 2 when I was watching it live.
I don't think so.
No, I think that's just retrospective.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be curious to see what my good, bad, and ugly would be when I was watching it in season 2.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what I would have picked for any of those things, except maybe my good for Crazy Shane.
That would hold true.
And it was funny reading the books, and we'll get to it later, but Lori's just a really awful character. And not like she's badly written. That's the way she's supposed to be. We're supposed to kind of loathe her.
Right. She was a hard character to like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I think she was written that way.
Yes. And the actress did a really good job of playing that. Like, I can't see anybody else, Sarah Wayne Callies. I couldn't see anybody else in the role. They did a really good job as far as like what she looked like and
I was
how
going to say she actually looked quite a bit like Lori from the comic books.
Yeah. So, but yeah, just the Rick-tatorship and remembering my loathe for Lori was my best. So I think that was probably the thing you couldn't put your finger on. It was just like, this just doesn't feel right. This isn't the Walking Dead that we know currently.
But it also just didn't feel like it fit as seamlessly in how I remember season 2 being. I mean, I remember overall really liking season 2. And like I said, Sophia coming out of the barn is one of my all-time favorite episodes. So right. I was just surprised that this episode didn't seem to hold up as well.
Right. So what was your ugly?
Well, so in spite of saying that, my ugly was a good ugly, and it's that we get the truth that we're all infected.
Oh, that's right.
So Randall dies of a broken neck. They make a point of saying that there are no bites.
No bite marks.
And we see that Shane gets stabbed by Rick and then turns. There's no interaction with a zombie, no bite marks, nothing like that. So we see 2 characters die and turn without being bitten.
Right.
And that's the first time that we've seen that in this series that we know of.
Right. And didn't the guy from the CDC in season 1 say it to Rick?
Well, that and you find that out in the season finale of this season, where Rick actually says that's what Jenner said to him, that we're all infected.
Oh, wow.
And he actually really alienates the group by admitting that he has kept that secret from them.
And I think we've talked about this. You don't keep those kind of secrets in the zombie apocalypse. You know, you don't hide your bite. It's a detriment. It's to the group. It's, it puts everyone in danger when you keep secrets like that.
So I think about it, and I think the reason that Rick probably held on to that information was, one, he wasn't sure, but the other is that he felt like it would just be a morale killer for the group to know that they were going to end up as zombies anyway.
Yeah, I'm just like, if anybody dies in their sleep of a heart attack or something, it's just, I mean, not like you could really do anything about it anyway, but it's just some good information to,
That is a valid point. I didn't think of it from that perspective.
Yeah.
But I do think he had legit reasons for hanging on to that information.
Yeah.
So what was your ugly?
My ugly was a good ugly. In spite of the Rick-tatorship, Rick and Carl had a really good moment, I think, in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
So Carl was fresh off the heels of feeling like he got Dale killed. And he was going through some stuff for a little guy. And he tried to go to Shane with it because it seemed like his dad, he wasn't able to talk to him. And, of course, I think, was it right after Lori said something to Shane? And Shane's like, no, you need to go to your dad with that.
Mm-hmm.
And Rick really pushed back. He's like, I have to get Randall out of here, and I just don't have time to talk to him, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm really glad that he took the time and sat down with Carl and said what he said. And he even, he laid it out. He's not as an eloquent or reflective speaker like his father was, and he doesn't have the words, but, this kind of stuff is going to happen, and you're not going to have the childhood that I had, and you have to be prepared for it. And I really think that was kind of the beginning of the Carl that we grew to love, not the Carl that kept running off and doing stupid kid stuff, but the Carl that was serious and, could take care of himself and others.
Well, and didn't they replicate that scene in the barn? Didn't they use that again in his kind of fever dream hallucinations around when he was dying?
Oh, I kind of think so.
I vaguely remember that. How bad is that it was less than a season ago and I don't remember that? But I seem to remember the scene from the barn being duplicated in the Rick dream.
Yeah, I feel like there was a scene where he and his dad were walking side by side on the farm.
No, he and Herschel were walking side by side on the farm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I seem to remember the scene in the barn as well. That scene of them looking out from the upper level of the barn.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like this was a pivotal moment for Carl's character.
I think that's very true.
Yeah. So that was my good ugly.
Well, do you have a little bit of writing potpourri before we go and talk about the comic books?
So I loved the opening part where they were flashing between Dale's funeral and them taking out the walkers, because it was talking about how, Dale wanted us all, he knew us so well and he wanted us to be better people and blah, blah, blah. And then juxtaposed to that, they would flash to, Andrea and Shane and everybody beating walkers to death.
I'm so glad that you said that, because that was one of the things that I thought about too. I thought that the splicing of those scenes with each other was so good, because they were so horrible. They were so out of control when they were putting the walkers down.
Right. And to bring back our favorite word, juxtaposition, Yeah. I I rewatched the episode for a second time, and I actually rewatched the intro a third time because it was done so well that, I mean, it was just so brutal and poignant at the same time.
And it really does put a fine point on what Dale was talking about in terms of our survivors losing their humanity.
Yes.
Because we remember from season 1, Rick was eulogizing the walker that they were about to take the guts from and saying, this was a person, this was his name. Mm-hmm. He had a photo of a pretty girl and $20 in his wallet. You know, how far they have fallen in just a season.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that too. I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah. So I think that's really all that I had that doesn't have to do with the books.
So I did make mention to myself that they actually mentioned Sonoy.
Yeah, oh, that is right. Yes.
Because that's where they're taking Randall back to.
That's right.
And I thought, oh, how cool is that? A little shout out to the town that has been such a home to The Walking Dead.
Right. It's where they filmed as Woodbury. Mm-hmm. And of course, friend of the pod, Thomas O'Mara, is helping host the Dead Bash in Sonoya.
Yeah, I thought it was super cool that they actually mentioned it, that they called it out by name. And I wouldn't have recognized that at the time that I was initially watching the episode.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I remember that. I just didn't write it down.
Do I have anything else that doesn't have to do with the book? I'm just thumbing through my notes here. I don't think so. I think we can go into Bill's Comic Book Corner.
Oh, so this is the first time. I have 6 volumes of The Walking Dead, and I think they contain about 6 books each. Mm-hmm. And they're really, I mean, if you were to break it down into how many pages per book, there's maybe 10 or 15 pages a book. I didn't think they would be that small. I thought it was a much more in-depth, every book was, 40 pages long.
I can't believe you've never read the comics.
Nope. I read it last night. And it is a quick read. I mean, it is a graphic novel. I mean, there are some full pages that are just pictures. There's no dialogue or anything. So it is a very quick read. If you have not read it, I would encourage you to pick it up. And literally, it took me probably 20-25 minutes.
So we lose Shane in the first volume, and it's actually issue 6 of the comic book.
Right.
And, one of the things that I wrote down was that Shane never made it to the farm.
Nope.
Everything takes place in the camp by the quarry.
Yep.
And in the comics, we didn't get one of the things that was one of my favorite storylines for Shane, which was when he killed Otis when they went to get the surgical supplies.
I loved that episode because we still use that now.
I thought that was a phenomenal storyline, and John Bernthal acted it so well, and the guy who played Otis acted it so well.
Yeah.
And I can't believe, looking back, that we would not have gotten that story if this had panned out the way it panned out in the comic books.
That's right. One of the things we say in Alaska is, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we always joke about, the Otis of the group, we're just going to kneecap somebody and run. And yeah, I had totally forgotten about that.
We may have to talk about that episode at some point.
Yeah, maybe.
So the other thing that I noticed is that in season 1, we had an episode where Rick and Shane are out in the woods with Dale, and Shane kind of draws down on Rick and puts him in his sights.
Yep.
And Dale catches him.
Yep.
And I thought, oh my God, for the people who wrote the comics, or for the people who read the comics and who were watching for the first time, they probably thought that was where Shane was going to die.
Yeah.
Because that's much more in terms of the timing and in terms of the arc that you see in the comic books.
Definitely. Yeah. That's interesting. So at the beginning of the episode for the show, we are picking up on Dale's funeral. And in the books, we open with Amy's funeral.
Right.
Andrea's sister. So I thought that was interesting that both of the places that Shane died opened up on somebody's funeral.
And he actually eulogizes Amy in the comic book.
Mm-hmm.
And Amy actually dies pretty much the same way that she died in the series.
Yep.
Which I thought was really cool. It was neat to go back and read that and see that storyline again, because I really did like that death, and I thought that was very impactful.
Yeah. And I think most of this book, right up until the end, really focuses kind of on Amy's death and one of the other characters getting sick, which parallels the season 1 episode where they left one of the guys by a tree.
Jim.
That was his request, Jim.
Yeah. And Jim's storyline pretty much plays out very much like it did in the series, in the comic book.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just so funny to me how scattered some of these scenes are. And scattered as in like peppered throughout the entire series. You know, you get the callbacks in, episode 10 to book 5. It's so funny how it's laid out in the book, and then how they just pepper it along in the story in the show. And that's one of the things that I love about the show, and that I'm surprised about in the books, is the show is so much more fleshed out. There's so much more of a backstory, and it's such a richer story for me. You get to know the characters better.
It's just different. I've read all of them up to the latest volume that's out. I'm not totally caught up in the single issues of the comic books, but I'm caught up to the volume that just came out, I want to say at the beginning of March. And it's just different. They're still rich and they're still intricate stories, but the way that the stories are told are very different.
I think it's just part of it is there's just not as much dialogue. Like at the very beginning of book 1, when we're just establishing, Rick getting shot and winding up in a coma. I just, even that little bit of an interaction between Shane and Rick in their patrol car, it was just made so much more interesting by the little bit of dialogue that they had. They were talking about women and everything like that. So, and that's not in the books. That scene is in the books where they're in the patrol car and confront the guy that shoots Rick, but it's not as rich for me.
But we don't get the Reverend Shane's a preaching.
So, yeah.
So I would have to say about the scene where Shane ultimately does lure Rick into the woods and break down in the comic books, what was so different for me between the comics and the scene in the television show where he's in the woods with Rick is that he seems much more broken, and he's not vicious in the comic books.
He's angry and hurt.
But he's much more hurt. He talks about Rick ripping his heart out. And how he can't live with this. And he basically says Lori would have come around eventually. Whereas Shane in the TV series calls Lori a broken woman and Carl a weak boy and says, they'll forget you. They've done it before. He's much more vicious and much more brutal to Rick in terms of the way that he just handles kind of coming at him when he finally breaks.
Yeah, he was definitely more rabid in the show and more emotional in the book.
I think so too.
Because they show him crying in the books. And I don't remember him crying on the show.
No, not at all. You don't get that from Shane at all.
No.
So go ahead.
So because they aren't on the farm, they're still in the camp. There's no Randall. So it really, it plays out kind of the same, but kind of different in that they have a confrontation in the camp, and Shane storms off, and Rick actually goes after Shane. Shane really didn't lure him out there. Rick went after Shane.
That's true. That's a very good point.
Yeah. But he took the opportunity.
And so what we ultimately see is not Rick stabbing him and then Carl putting down a zombified Shane, but we actually see Carl killing Rick because he comes upon Shane, or not killing Rick, killing Shane because he comes upon Shane menacing Rick.
Yes.
So Carl shoots him through the neck. That's
where we have the scene that you called back to with Dale, where Shane is pointing I don't know if looks like a shotgun.
Yeah, I think a rifle, actually. I think like a big rifle, but could be shotgun.
Pointing it straight at Rick, and Carl happens upon him and shoots Shane in the neck, and Shane bleeds out.
And we get this really pivotal scene right at the end of the book where Rick is hugging Carl, and Carl's saying, "It's not like killing the dead ones." And Rick says, it never should be.
Should be. Yeah. And so also in the books, we don't know that if you die of something other than from a walker, that you reanimate. So we don't get this actually in the book, but they wind up burying Shane at the camp.
Well, we don't get it in the book at that point.
Right. So in this point in the books, we shoot Shane, we kill Shane, and then we bury Shane, and Shane reanimates under the dirt.
So did you go forward and read the issue where that knowledge becomes known to us?
I did not.
So do you want me to talk about it, or do you want me to not? Okay.
You can go ahead and talk. I think it's book 15.
Yeah, so it's issue 15 of the comic book. It's volume 3 of the collected works, and the volume is called Safety Behind Bars. And so what we get is that volume starts with the group entering the prison. So by volume 3 of the books, we're already at the prison. Mm-hmm. So that goes quite a bit faster, in terms of the speed as compared to the series.
Right.
And we have the character Tyrese as part of the group entering the prison. So he's already in the group, and he's got a daughter and her boyfriend, Chris. And what happens is Chris and Julie, the daughter, have a suicide pact. And Chris kills Julie before Julie can kill him. They were supposed to pull the trigger simultaneously, and he actually kills Julie, and she turns. So that's how they find out that you
turn no matter what.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, in the comic books, there was no Jenner, there was no CDC, there was no one telling Rick that secret.
No.
So Rick actually found that out when he witnessed Julie coming back.
Yes. So he hops on a motorcycle and goes back.
Daryl. It's totally a panel that looks like Daryl zooming off on a motorcycle.
Yeah. And he goes back and he digs Shane up. And I don't remember. I remember I read what he said, but I can't remember what it is.
So I wrote it down.
Of course. Great minds think alike.
He said, "I couldn't sleep knowing you were down there. Would you have left me? You were a good man, Shane. I don't know why you did what you did, but you were a good man. I had to set things right." Then he puts him down, and then he says, "I ain't gonna bury you again, you son of a bitch." And leaves him on top of the grave.
Wow.
But he does go back and tell Lori what he did, and he goes back and tells everyone that you can turn without being bitten.
Right.
So the information does come out to the group as a whole that you turn no matter what, unless you get double tapped.
But that is so different from the books. And I get it.
You mean the book is so different from the series?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I totally get it, because like you're not going to have, in the middle of season 3, you're not going to have Rick go back and dig up Shane. Like it's just the way. And so we got sort of the same kind of thing, with Carl killing zombified Shane that we did in the books. But yeah, it's wild how different it was.
It was very different. And just to have that whole storyline with Tyrese, and you really see in some of the early stuff with Tyrese there, the kind of badass that everybody really wanted Tyrese to be, because in the comic books, he really was.
Well, we have Daryl for that.
Right. Yeah, Tyrese was more of a gentle giant in the series. So,
right. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's how different Shane as a character and how different Shane's death was between the comic books and the series.
Yeah, it blew my mind when I learned that he died in book 6 and made a reappearance in book 15 as a zombie. I was like, what?
And I was looking on the Wikipedia about it, and there was also some flashback, I want to say around like episode 30 or issue 37, somewhere around there, that he actually comes back very briefly too, but I didn't go and seek that out.
This is why we say it's not a zombie show. It is a soap opera that takes place in the zombie apocalypse, because I mean, that's almost like the evil twin, coming after you've killed the good twin, or, like it's just anyone can pop back up at any time.
I don't actually describe it that way, because I feel like it's, and this is just me, this is my own personal preference, but I feel like it's kind of demeaning to call it a soap opera. I feel like it's really a dramatic take on how people would fall apart in any kind of apocalyptic scenario.
Yes, and I'm not thinking soap opera like Days of Our Lives. I'm thinking of a episodic, long-running show.
Yeah.
That just happens to take place in the zombie apocalypse. Because I do know a lot of people who are like, I'm not really into zombies. I'm like, the zombies are kind of tertiary characters.
That's what I tell people. I'm like, you know what? Yeah. It's not about the zombies. It's about human nature.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have we seen that it's always the fight the dead, fear the living?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, anything else?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, the book is shockingly basically a simplified version. It's like the Cliff's Notes of the show.
Well,
with some slight errors.
And I think the real take home for me going back and looking at it against this episode was just what we said about being so happy that Jon Bernthal took the character so far and had such a chance to develop him, because it really was overall a great story arc.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think there's probably a lot of characters that I will find that I like that the show kept them on longer, or that maybe some stuff was switched around, with like Andrea and Michonne and everything.
You're going to find a lot of stuff has been switched around.
Yep. So I am going to have to crack a book more often.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have to read. Even with pictures, you have to read.
I still have to crack Good Omens so we can podcast about that.
Right? Or you can be the one who comes to it with no knowledge of the book, which is fine if you want to do it that way.
No, I'd rather come to it with fresh knowledge of the book.
I've been thinking about going back and reading it again.
What's funny is I've been thinking all day about podcasting tonight. I'm like, I just feel so ill prepared. I feel like a Johnny-come-lately poser about like being a fan of the book, being a fan and having never read the books.
No, there are lots of people who haven't read the comic books.
And that's what I always say with the other reviews that I do is I'm Joe Everyman who has never been invested in this universe before. So I'm coming at it from that perspective, not somebody who is a hardcore fan who knows every single line and every single character and every single, direction that they take in whatever, piece that it's coming from, whether it's a comic book or something else.
So you are giving me the perfect segue.
Okay.
I did want to mention that I have been invited by Phil to come on probably Capes and Lunatics sidekicks. I'm not sure that it's going to be on the main Capes and Lunatics to talk about a book called Moon Knight.
Oh, I remember you guys. I was looped in on this message.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to podcast with him tomorrow about a volume kind of later in the development of the character, a reboot of the character. So if folks are interested in hearing about the comic book Moon Knight, check us out on Capes and Lunatics.
On Phil's YouTube or wherever you get podcasts.
Yeah, I think we're actually going to try to do it via Google Hangouts. So I think it will be both on YouTube and on their podcast app.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I will have to read the wiki on it.
I have to say, so I've read a few volumes of it now, not to totally digress and keep us on longer, but there are several different incarnations of Moon Knight with different artists and different authors. And this by far has been my favorite art and my favorite writer. And I'm looking forward to reading the second volume.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well, so I want to apologize to people about our 28 Days Later podcast being a bit late. Rob posted, and he's a busy guy, and he's got a life outside of his podcast empire, so he said that he would try to get to it tomorrow.
So you make it a twofer.
Right. And I'm not sure when you're going to get this one, but like we talked about at the beginning of the episode, we're going to review the first episode of Black Summer. And probably kind of talk about just some general feelings about the overall series so far. We'll try to avoid spoilers beyond episode 1 though.
Yeah. Definitely. I have so much to say about it.
It was really good. I'm looking forward to going back and watching it for the podcast, actually.
Oh, yeah. I get to do that.
All right, but until then,
just remember, take it one dead day at a time.
All right, everybody, have a good week.
Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.
Ugh.